The late afternoon sun draped Brooklyn in a golden haze, softening the edges of brownstone buildings and painting the sidewalks with long, dappled shadows. On the corner of a quiet street stood the Artisan's Haven, a cafe that was more than just a coffee place. It was a sanctuary for dreamers, painters, writers, and anyone who sought beauty amid the chaos of New York. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of freshly ground beans and the faint trace of oil paint from the small gallery tucked into the cafe's back room. Sketches lined the brick walls, some raw and unfinished, others glowing with color and life. At one table, an older man scribbled poetry into a worn notebook. At another, a group of students debated the meaning of modern art. The hum of life was gentle but constant, a symphony of voices rising and falling like the ebb of waves. Behind the counter, Evelyn Ramirez moved with quiet determination. Her dark curls framed a face that held both resilience and warmth. Her eyes, deep brown with flecks of gold, when the light touched them, betrayed the hunger of someone who wanted more than the ordinary. Though she wore the black apron of a part-time barista, her soul belonged to the canvas, to the charcoal sketches she created in stolen hours when the cafe was empty. She greeted customers with an easy smile, but her mind wandered often sketching stories of strangers in her imagination. The elderly poet became a forgotten war hero. The students transformed into future revolutionaries. Evelyn's world was one where reality bent to the dreams she carried quietly within her chest. That evening, she was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice when the door swung open with a sharp bell ring. Anthony King stepped into the Artisan's Haven with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. Yet he wished to be invisible in moments like this. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit that clung to his frame like it had been made for him alone. His steel blue eyes scanned the cafe, noting every detail in seconds: the uneven row of bar stools, the crack in the far left window, the faint tremor in the young barista's hands as she balanced two steaming lattes. Anthony had the kind of presence that turned heads, though he had long grown tired of the attention. Success had etched lines of both pride and exhaustion into his face. Beneath the polished exterior was a man scarred by loss, carrying the weight of memories he rarely allowed to surface. His late wife's laughter still haunted him in quiet moments, a cruel reminder of what fate had stolen. He approached the counter without haste, but there was precision in his movements, controlled and deliberate, like a man who measured every step in life. Evelyn looked up, startled by the intensity of his gaze. "Good evening," he said, his voice deep-edged with restrained authority. Evelyn blinked, then smiled politely. "Good evening. What can I get for you?" He glanced briefly at the menu, but knew he would order the simplest thing: black coffee. No sugar. Her hands moved quickly, preparing his drink. She noticed his expensive watch, silver understated, but worth more than she could make in months at the cafe. His suit carried the scent of rain and leather, something sharp and undeniably masculine. She wondered what a man like him was doing in a small Brooklyn cafe when there were dozens of upscale places in Manhattan better suited to his kind. "Here you go," she said softly, sliding the cup toward him. Their fingers brushed for the briefest moment, an accidental touch, yet enough to spark something unexplainable. Evelyn pulled back quickly, her cheeks warming, while Anthony accepted the coffee with a nod. Anthony found a table near the window and sat alone. He sipped the coffee slowly, his gaze drifting outside to the passing crowds. Yet he found his attention returning again and again to the young woman behind the counter. She carried herself quietly, but there was an undeniable fire in her eyes, a spark he recognized from another lifetime, the kind that refused to be extinguished no matter the circumstances. Evelyn, too, felt the weight of his gaze. Though she tried to busy herself with wiping down counters and taking orders, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about him, something unsettling, magnetic, impossible to ignore. She had seen wealthy men before, who were arrogant and self-indulgent. But this one was different. There was a silence in him, a loneliness that resonated with her. As the cafe's crowd thinned with the fading light of dusk, Evelyn finally allowed herself a moment of rest. She leaned against the counter, sketchbook in hand, and began tracing the outline of a man's silhouette. Strong jawline, piercing eyes, broad shoulders. It was Anthony, though she didn't realize it until the lines had already taken form. When she looked up, she caught him watching her, a faint smirk, tugging at his lips, as if he knew exactly what she had been doing. Her heart skipped, but she quickly closed the sketchbook, embarrassed. The moment passed, and Evelyn decided to leave early that evening. She stepped out into the cooling air, her bag slung across her shoulder. The Brooklyn streets glimmered under the neon lights of corner stores and flickering lampposts. The air smelled of roasted peanuts from a nearby cart and the faint metallic tang of the subway below. She walked briskly, her mind still tangled with thoughts of the stranger in the cafe. Anthony King. She didn't know his name yet, but she knew his presence, and it lingered like a melody she couldn't forget. Suddenly, a shadow darted from the alley. A man in a hood lunged forward, yanking at her bag with brutal force. Evelyn gasped, struggling to hold on. "Let go!" she cried, her voice echoing through the nearly empty street. Panic surged as the strap dug into her shoulder, and the thief shoved her violently against the wall. Before she could scream again, another figure appeared, swift, commanding. Anthony. He had been leaving the cafe only moments after her, compelled by something he couldn't quite explain. When he saw her in danger, instinct took over. "Hey!" Anthony's voice thundered across the street. The mugger turned, startled, but Anthony was already there, his hand gripping the man's wrist with unyielding force. With a sharp twist, he disarmed him, sending the stolen bag clattering to the ground. The thief tried to fight back, but Anthony's strength and precision, honed from years of discipline, left no room for resistance. The hooded man broke free only long enough to stumble back into the shadows of the alley, disappearing into the night. Anthony turned immediately to Evelyn. "Are you hurt?" Her breath came in ragged bursts, her heart pounding in her chest. She shook her head, though her knees trembled beneath her. I think I'm okay." He bent to pick up her bag and handed it to her gently. "You should be more careful. Brooklyn's streets aren't always kind." For a moment, Evelyn could only stare at him. The man who had seemed so distant, so untouchable inside the cafe, now stood before her as her savior. The contrast unsettled her, yet drew her in deeper than she cared to admit. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and gratitude. Anthony studied her for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then, with a curt nod, he said, "Get home safe." He turned to leave, but Evelyn found herself calling out, "Wait!" He paused, glancing back. "I don't even know your name," she said. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face before he replied, "Anthony. Anthony King." The name rolled off his tongue with quiet finality, like a signature on a page that would change everything. Evelyn felt the weight of it settle into her memory, knowing instinctively that this night, the night she met Anthony King, was the beginning of something she could neither predict nor control. As Anthony disappeared into the Brooklyn night, Evelyn clutched her bag tightly to her chest, her pulse still racing. She looked down the street where the thief had fled, then back in the direction Anthony had gone. Two paths, two choices, but only one had already begun to weave itself into her destiny. The city lights shimmered like stars scattered across the pavement, and Evelyn whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "Anthony King." It was only the beginning. The following week unfolded like a dream Evelyn could not quite shake. The night Anthony King had stepped in and saved her, replayed in her mind again and again, not just the danger of the robbery, but the way his eyes had steadied hers, the quiet strength in his voice, the strange gravity that seemed to draw her closer every time she thought of him. She told herself it was a chance, a random encounter in Brooklyn, a stranger who happened to be passing by. And yet her instincts whispered otherwise. Some people entered your life like a soft breeze. Anthony had arrived like a storm, rearranging everything she thought she knew about herself. 3 days later, Evelyn was sketching in the corner of the Artisan's Haven after her shift when the bell above the door chimed. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The air seemed to change with his presence, charged restless alive. Anthony walked in wearing a dark coat over a crisp white shirt, his polished shoes tapping lightly against the wooden floor. He ordered another black coffee. No sugar. And this time he approached her table instead of sitting by the window. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low-measured. Evelyn's hand hesitated over her sketchbook before she closed it. "It's a free country," she replied, masking her sudden nervousness with playful defiance. A faint smile touched his lips as he sat across from her. They spoke of little things at first, the bustle of the city, the unpredictable New York weather, the art that adorned the cafe's walls. Yet beneath every word was an undercurrent neither could ignore. Anthony listened intently, his gaze unwavering as if every syllable mattered. And Evelyn, though cautious, found herself drawn to him more than she cared to admit. His presence was like a flame, dangerous, consuming, yet impossible to resist. It wasn't until the fourth visit that Evelyn's suspicions began. When a sleek black car pulled outside, she had stayed late to clean, humming softly. A man in a suit stepped out, scanning the street with sharp, practiced eyes before opening the door. Anthony emerged from the back seat. Evelyn froze. The man was not simply a stranger who stumbled into her cafe. He was escorted, protected. The kind of treatment reserved for power, for wealth, for people far removed from the quiet, ordinary world she knew. Anthony caught her watching. For the first time, his calm facade faltered, a flicker of something like regret crossing his features. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said softly, as he entered, his tone almost apologetic. Her brow furrowed. "Supposed to see what? Do you not take the subway like the rest of us?" He exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "It isn't very easy." But complications, Evelyn knew, were just another word for secrets. The truth came not from Anthony himself, but from a headline. One evening, while browsing a newsstand near the subway, Evelyn's eyes landed on the glossy cover of a business magazine. There, staring back at her, was the man she had been sharing coffee with for over a week. Anthony King, the visionary behind King Industries, Chicago's rising titan. The photograph captured him in the same immaculate suit, standing in front of a towering glass building, confidence radiating from his every feature. The article below described him as the CEO of a multinational conglomerate with investments in technology, real estate, and finance, a man of immense influence, a billionaire whose decisions rippled through markets worldwide. Evelyn's stomach churned. So much for the quiet, mysterious stranger. He hadn't just hidden the truth, he had let her believe he was ordinary, someone within reach. The Anthony King she had begun to trust was a shadow, a carefully curated illusion. That night, when Anthony returned to the cafe, Evelyn was ready. Her sketchbook lay closed on the table, her expression guarded. "You lied to me," she said before he could even speak. Anthony's steps faltered. "Evelyn, you let me think you were just some businessman passing through. But you're not. You're Anthony King, the Anthony King. Do you know how humiliating it feels to discover the truth on a magazine cover?" His eyes softened, though his posture remained steady. "I never meant to deceive you." "Then what do you call it?" she demanded, her voice trembling with equal parts anger and hurt. Anthony hesitated, then pulled out the chair opposite her, lowering himself into it. "I call it survival. People see my name and company, and suddenly I'm no longer a man. I become a symbol, a wallet, a prize. I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen for myself, not for the empire I built." Evelyn's throat tightened. His words pierced something in her, but the sting of betrayal lingered. "So you used me as your experiment?" "No." His voice was firm and steady, but there was a plea in his eyes. "You were never an experiment. From the moment I met you, I wanted you to see me. Just me." Evelyn turned away, staring at the rain streaking down the cafe window. The city outside blurred into smudges of neon and shadow. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. His tone was sincere, a vulnerability she hadn't expected from a man of his stature. But trust once cracked was not so easily repaired. "You should have told me," she whispered. "I was afraid," Anthony admitted. "Afraid you'd walk away before I could prove I'm more than a headline. Afraid you'd never know me beyond the articles, the rumors, the lies the world spins about me." The silence between them grew heavy, filled with unspoken questions. Evelyn's heart battled her mind, torn between her warmth in his presence and the cold sting of betrayal. As the night wore on, the cafe emptied until they were the only two left. Anthony leaned forward, resting his clasped hands on the table. "My father built King Industries from nothing," he said quietly. "When he died, the world expected me to be his mirror, ruthless, untouchable. I became that man because I had no choice. But it's lonely at the top, Evelyn. You don't know who's genuine, who wants you, and who wants what you can give them." Evelyn searched his face, looking for cracks in the mask. What she found startled her. For the first time, Anthony King looked not like a titan, but like a man haunted, weary, desperate to be seen. Her chest tightened. She understood loneliness. She had lived it in quieter ways, in the gaps between her art and her reality. And yet, the ache of betrayal still pulsed within her, reminding her that love without honesty was a fragile, dangerous thing. When Anthony finally rose to leave, he paused by her side. "I know I've given you reason to doubt me, but please don't let the shadows of my world close your eyes to what's real between us." Evelyn fixed her gaze on the sketchbook in her lap, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the cover. She didn't answer, not immediately. At last, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "You should have trusted me with the truth." Anthony's jaw tightened, but he nodded once, accepting the verdict she had rendered. Without another word, he turned and walked out into the night, his figure swallowed by the rain-soaked streets of Brooklyn. Evelyn sat in silence long after he was gone, her heart a battlefield of longing and mistrust. Deep inside, she knew this was not the end, merely the beginning of a war between love and deception, light and shadow. And though she tried to convince herself otherwise, she couldn't escape the feeling that Anthony King's secrets had only begun to unravel. Later that night, Evelyn lay awake in her small apartment, the magazine still on her nightstand. Anthony's face stared up at her from the glossy cover. Powerful, untouchable, a man who belonged to a world far beyond her own. She touched the edge of the page, her chest heavy. Who was the real Anthony King? The man who saved her in the alley, whose eyes had softened when he looked at her? Or the billionaire whose empire stretched across continents, cloaked in power and shadows? As sleep finally claimed her, Evelyn knew one thing with unsettling certainty. Her heart was already entangled in his world, whether she wanted it or not. And secrets once revealed had a way of changing everything. The rain had barely ceased when the storm of whispers began. Evelyn hadn't expected her private world to collide so violently with Anthony's public one. But fate, it seemed, thrived on collisions. It started with a headline splashed across the morning paper. She saw it while waiting for the subway. The ink still smelling fresh. Anthony King spotted in Brooklyn, with mysterious woman romance, amid shadows of tragedy. Her chest tightened. A grainy photograph accompanied the words, Anthony stepping out of the café, his head slightly bowed while she stood in the doorway behind him. Her first thought was disbelief. Her second was dread. By the afternoon, her phone buzzed relentlessly, with messages from coworkers, acquaintances, even people she hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know, was it true? Was she the woman by Anthony King's side? Evelyn wished it were that simple. She hoped it was merely about love, about the strange magnetic pull between them. But the articles didn't stop at romance. They went further, darker. The shadow of Marissa King tragedy, or murder. Evelyn froze as she read. Anthony's late wife Marissa had died 3 years ago in Los Angeles, her car found wrecked along a desolate coastal highway. Official reports ruled it an accident, but speculation had thrived in the absence of clarity. Rumors whispered that the marriage had been strained, that Anthony's temper had grown violent. Paparazzi had caught glimpses of arguments. Neighbors claimed they heard shouting, and though police investigations found no evidence of foul play, the media branded him a man with blood on his hands, a billionaire too powerful to prosecute. Evelyn pressed the screen of her phone until her hands shook. Every word felt like poison, every sentence a blade slicing through the fragile trust she was trying to build. When Anthony came to see her that evening, he found her apartment lights dimmed and the newspaper spread across her small wooden table. She didn't rise when he entered. She only looked at him, tall, imposing, every inch the man in those headlines. "Is it true?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Anthony glanced at the paper, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't believe everything they write." "That's not an answer," Evelyn whispered. Silence stretched between them, heavy, suffocating. Finally, Anthony sat across from her, his expression carved in stone. "Marissa was my wife." He began slowly, his voice roughened by memory. "Her death was a tragedy, a wound that never healed. But I did not kill her, Evelyn." Her heart clenched. She wanted to believe him desperately, but the doubt planted by the articles gnawed at her. "Then why does everyone think you did?" Anthony's eyes darkened steel blue, flickering with pain. "Because grief makes people cruel. Because money makes me an easy target. And because the truth is more complicated than anyone cares to know." The following days became unbearable. Paparazzi began lurking outside the cafe, cameras flashing whenever she stepped out. Customers whispered behind their cups, pointing, speculating. At night, Evelyn scrolled endlessly through articles, photos, and videos. There were clips of Anthony and Marissa attending galas, her smile dazzling, his expression unreadable. There were grainy images of them fighting in parking lots, her hands flailing, his face tight with anger. The world painted Anthony King as a monster in Armani suits. And Evelyn, by extension, was the naive girl who had fallen into his trap. The worst came when her art instructor called, voice hesitant but firm, "Evelyn, the gallery can't host your work next month. It's too much risk, too much attention." "I'm sorry." Her dreams, fragile as glass, began to crack under the weight of scandal. She confronted Anthony again, this time with anger burning through her fear. "They're tearing me apart out there," she cried, pacing her small apartment. "I can't go to work without cameras in my face, and I can't even buy groceries without people whispering. All because of you, because of your past." Anthony stood near the window, his silhouette carved against the city lights. "Do you think I don't know what they say about me? I live with it every day." "Then tell me the truth." Evelyn's voice broke. "Did you love her? Did you hurt her? Did you enough?" The word cut through the air sharp as glass. He turned his eyes fierce, but beneath the fury was something else, something broken. "I loved Marissa," he said hoarsely. "But our marriage, it was a battlefield. She wanted a life I couldn't give. I was building an empire and she wanted freedom. We fought, yes. Too much. But the night she died, I wasn't even there. I was in Chicago in a meeting that lasted until dawn. The police verified it, but the world chose to believe the story that sold more papers." Evelyn searched his face, every line, every shadow. His voice shook, not with fear, but with something raw, something real. Her anger softened, replaced by an ache she couldn't name. She reached for him without thinking, her fingers brushing his hand. "I don't know what to believe," she whispered. "Believe me," Anthony said, his eyes locking with hers. "Not the papers, not the cameras. Me." But belief was not so simple when the world had already chosen its villain. The next morning, Evelyn's phone rang incessantly. Journalists offered money for interviews. Tabloids wanted her exclusive story. Strangers online dissected her life art background and every photo she posted. One headline blared, "Anthony King's new flame is Evelyn Ramirez, the next victim." Tears burned Evelyn's eyes as she read. She had never asked for this, never wanted her name to be tangled in scandal. Yet here she was, a pawn in a narrative too large to escape. Anthony tried to shield her. His security detail began following discreetly, shadowing her walk to work and her late-night trips to the store. But protection only made the attention worse. The more invisible walls he built around her, the more visible she became. One evening, Evelyn broke. "I can't do this," she cried, shoving a stack of newspapers toward him. Headlines screamed of murder, betrayal, and greed. Her name was plastered beside his, like ink binding her to his sins. Anthony's face hardened. "You think walking away will stop them? Once they have your name, they never let go." Her hands trembled. "So what am I supposed to do? Live in your shadow? Let the world destroy everything I've worked for?" For the first time, Anthony faltered. The unshakable titan of King Industries looked weary, almost fragile. He stepped closer, his voice low, desperate. "I don't want to lose you, Evelyn. Not to them, not to fear. I can fight this war, but not without you." Her heart ached at his words, at the sincerity in his eyes. But fear coiled tight around her chest, whispering that love alone was not enough to withstand the storm. That night, Evelyn lay awake staring at the ceiling, while the city's noise seeped through her window. Her phone buzzed with yet another notification, but she couldn't bear to look. She thought of Anthony, his haunted eyes, his plea for trust, the shadows of his past that clung to him like chains. She thought of Marissa, the wife lost to mystery, the ghost now standing between them. And she thought of herself caught in the crossfire of a story that was no longer hers to control. The world had chosen Anthony King's narrative long before Evelyn Ramirez entered his life. And now, whether she wanted it or not, she was part of it. As dawn crept over Brooklyn, Evelyn whispered to herself a fragile vow. "I need to know the truth, all of it." For love demanded more than trust. It demanded answers, and she was determined to find them, even if it meant uncovering secrets she wasn't ready to face. Chicago's skyline glittered like a crown of glass and steel, but beneath the surface storm clouds gathered. For weeks, Anthony King had sensed the subtle shifts in the market, the whispers of betrayal among business partners, and his enemies' quiet but deliberate moves. King Industries, the empire he had poured his soul into, was attacked. It wasn't just financial. It was calculated, personal. Competitors spread rumors, investors grew restless, and board members questioned his leadership. His father's legacy teetered on the edge with it the world he had built. But Anthony's most significant battle wasn't in boardrooms. It was in his heart, where Evelyn's image lingered like a fragile flame. Anthony barely slept. His days blurred into nights filled with emergency calls, tense meetings, and strategies scribbled across endless sheets of paper. Evelyn saw the toll it took on him. She would find him in his penthouse office, suit jacket tossed aside, tie loosened, staring out at the city, with exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "You can't keep going like this," she whispered one night, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. His muscles tensed, though not at her touch. "If I stop Evelyn, they'll devour everything. My company, my father's name, everything I fought for." She looked at him, her heart aching. "And what about us?" For the first time he faltered. His eyes met hers, and for a moment the mask slipped, revealing the man beneath, the one who longed for peace, for love, for her. "You are the only thing keeping me from breaking," he confessed. The attack grew sharper. Headlines screamed of King Industries' inevitable collapse. Stock prices wavered. Confidential documents appeared in competitors' hands and leaked from someone inside. Anthony slammed a folder shut in fury one evening. "There's a traitor in my company," he growled, pacing like a caged lion. "Someone who wants to see me ruined." Evelyn reached for him. "Then fight smarter, not harder. Don't let them drag you into the mud." He stopped, his gaze softening as it landed on her. "You don't know how ruthless this world is, Evelyn. Then show them you're stronger," she said firmly. For a brief, shining moment, he allowed himself to believe her. But then came the blow that neither of them expected. It arrived on a quiet evening. Evelyn was sketching in the living room, while Anthony reviewed contracts. Her phone buzzed with a notification from a news site she didn't recognize. Usually she would have ignored it, but the headline froze her blood. "Exclusive leaked video of Anthony King and late wife. Hours before, fatal crash." Her hand trembled as she tapped the link. The footage was grainy, taken from what seemed to be a parking garage security camera. Yet the figures were unmistakable: Anthony and Marissa. They stood inches apart, their voices muffled but urgent. Anthony's gestures were sharp and frustrated, his arm slicing through the air as he spoke. Marissa shoved him back, her face twisted in anger. At one point, she slapped his chest, and he grabbed her wrist, not violently, but firmly, undeniably. The clip ended with Marissa storming away, Anthony frozen in place. Evelyn's chest tightened, her mind filled with the poisonous whispers of the press, the rumors of violence, the unanswered questions. She didn't realize Anthony had approached until his voice cut through the silence. "What are you watching?" She looked up, guilt and fear flashing in her eyes. "Anthony, it's everywhere, the video." He froze as he saw the screen. For a moment, the air itself seemed to shatter. Anthony's face hardened. His jaw clenched as he grabbed the phone and tossed it onto the couch. "That footage is manipulated and taken out of context." "Then tell me the context," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. His silence was louder than any confession. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "I argued with her, and," he admitted finally, his voice low. "We fought. She was furious with me that night, and yes, I stopped her when she tried to leave. But I never hurt her, Evelyn. You have to believe that." Her heart twisted. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But the image of the video seared itself into her mind. The anger, the tension, the way his hand closed around Marissa's wrist. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked, tears filling her eyes. "Because it doesn't matter." His voice broke raw with frustration. "No matter what I say, the world will twist it into guilt. I didn't want you to see me through their eyes. But now, I can't unsee it," she whispered, The days that followed were a blur of cold silences and unspoken fears. Anthony buried himself deeper in his work, fighting to keep King Industries afloat. Evelyn drifted further into doubt, torn between the man she loved and the shadows of his past. Paparazzi grew more vicious. Every photo of them together was dissected, every glance interpreted. Commentators speculated not just on Anthony's business, but on Evelyn herself. Was she a fool? A gold digger, the next tragedy in the making? One night, unable to bear the weight, Evelyn confronted him again. "I need the truth, Anthony. All of it. If there's anything else you haven't told me." His eyes, tired and fierce, locked on hers. "The truth is that I'm fighting a war on every front: my company, my name, my past, and now us. And I don't know if I can win them all." Her heart broke at the weariness in his voice, yet the doubt remained sharp and unrelenting. The storm peaked when a rival CEO announced a hostile takeover of King Industries. The stock plummeted. Board members turned. And in the chaos, the leaked video continued to haunt every headline. Anthony stood in the boardroom, his empire crumbling while Evelyn watched from the sidelines. He was powerful and commanding, but she could see the cracks, the exhaustion, the rage, the fear that this was the end. When the meeting ended, he found her waiting. The world outside didn't exist for a moment, only the silence between them, heavy with unspoken questions. "Do you believe me?" he asked finally, his voice breaking. "Or do you see me the way they do?" Evelyn's throat closed. She wanted to say yes. She tried to ease the storm in his eyes, but the image of the video rose again, unyielding. "I don't know," she whispered. The words shattered him more than any enemy ever could. That night, Anthony stood alone in his penthouse office. The city sprawled beneath him like a kingdom slipping through his fingers. His reflection in the glass looked less like a king and more like a man on the brink of ruin. In the quiet, he thought of Evelyn, the warmth of her smile, the doubt in her eyes. She was the anchor he had clung to, but now even that seemed uncertain. And Evelyn, lying awake in her own apartment, whispered into the darkness, "Who are you, Anthony King? The man I love, or the man the world says you are?" The storm had only just begun. The storm around Anthony King had not yet passed, when another shadow emerged, darker and far more dangerous than scandal or corporate rivalry. His name was Vincent Carter. On the surface, he was a polished magnate CEO of Carter Global Holdings, a competitor in nearly every market King Industries dominated. He was charming, eloquent, and a self-made man who loved the spotlight. But to Anthony, Vincent was poison, calculated, merciless, the kind of rival who thrived on others' destruction rather than his own victories. And to Evelyn, she had once known Vincent, though she never expected to see him again. It happened on a gray afternoon when Evelyn slipped into a small art supply store in Brooklyn. She was searching for new charcoal pencils, desperate to lose herself in sketching, to drown out the noise of flashing cameras and the whispers that followed her everywhere now. "Evelyn." The voice stopped her cold. Smooth, familiar, but laced with something sharper now. She turned, her heart stuttering. Vincent Carter stood before her, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, far too elegant for the simple store. His smile spread slowly, the kind of smile that carried memory and intent. "It's been years," he said, his gaze raking over her with an unsettling blend of admiration and hunger. "Vincent?" Evelyn's voice was hesitant. Memories flickered: college days, fleeting conversations, the way he lingered a little too long whenever their paths crossed. He had always been kind then, if a little intense. But the man before her was not the boy she remembered. I never thought I'd run into you again. He continued, stepping closer. But then, New York has its surprises. Evelyn shifted uneasily. What are you doing here? He chuckled. Business. Always business. But imagine my delight when I discovered the girl I once adored is now the woman standing beside Anthony King. The mention of Anthony's name tightened her chest. It's not what you think. Vincent's eyes gleamed. On the contrary, Evelyn, it's precisely what I think. And it's why I wanted to see you. They went to a quiet cafe nearby, Vincent insisting. Evelyn agreed reluctantly, curiosity battling unease. He leaned across the table, his voice low, smooth as silk. Anthony King is not the man you believe he is. Evelyn stiffened. I don't want to hear this. You should, Vincent pressed, for your own sake. Because once I cared for you, Evelyn. Perhaps I still do. And I can't watch him destroy you. She shook her head, anger flaring. You don't know him. Oh, I know him, Vincent said, his smile thin. Better than you think. He's ruthless. He devours everything in his path. His company, his rivals. Even his wife. Evelyn's breath caught. Don't. Vincent's eyes softened, but his words cut like blades. The night Marissa died, she wasn't alone. There are things the police buried, things the media whispered but never proved. I've seen proof that Anthony lost his temper more than once. Do you really believe he's innocent? Her stomach churned. If you have proof, why haven't you shown it? Timing is everything, Vincent replied smoothly. And some truths must be revealed when they can't be silenced. That evening, Evelyn couldn't shake Vincent's words. They burrowed into her mind like thorns, reopening every wound the leaked video had inflicted. She hesitated when Anthony called to check on her, his voice weary from another day of boardroom battles. She listened, but her silence spoke louder than any answer. Evelyn, he murmured, noticing her distance. What's wrong? Nothing, she lied, her throat tight, just tired. But in her mind, Vincent's voice echoed. Do you believe he's innocent? Anthony first sensed Vincent's presence when Carter Global launched an aggressive campaign undercutting King Industries at every turn. Contracts. Anthony thought Secure slipped through his fingers. Investors wavered. And at the center of every betrayal, every whispered deal, stood Vincent Carter with his charming smile and polished lies. He's not just after my company, Anthony growled to his advisors. He's after me. What he didn't know was that Vincent was also after Evelyn. Evelyn received an unmarked envelope slipped under her apartment door a week later. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no signature. Her hands trembled as she plugged it into her laptop. The screen flickered, then revealed a series of photographs. Anthony and Marissa again. Not the public smiling couple the magazines had adored, but private moments, angry, raw, unsettling. One showed Marissa with tears streaking her face, Anthony's hand gripping her arm as he leaned in close, his expression unreadable. Another captured the aftermath of what looked like a heated argument in their Los Angeles home furniture. Toppled glass, shattered on the floor. Evelyn's chest tightened. She didn't want to believe it, but the images burned into her mind. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. He isn't who you think he is. V. Her breath caught. Vincent. That night, Anthony came to see her. He looked more exhausted than she had ever seen him, shadows carved deep under his eyes. I needed to see you, he said, his voice raw. The board is fracturing. Vincent is circling like a vulture. But what matters most to me right now is you. Evelyn swallowed hard, hiding the flash drive in her drawer. Anthony. He reached for her hands, clasping them tightly. "Tell me you still believe in me. Tell me you're not listening to the lies." Her lips parted, but the words caught. She saw his sincerity, the ache in his eyes. And yet, behind it, the photographs flickered in her mind, haunting, damning. I don't know," she whispered. Anthony's grip loosened. His expression hardened, not with anger, but with hurt deeper than any wound. Then Vincent has already won. When Anthony left, Evelyn collapsed onto her bed, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her heart ached for him, for the man who had saved her, held her, and confessed his loneliness. But doubt now coiled around her love, like a snake tightening, suffocating. In the silence of her apartment, she pulled out the flash drive again, staring at the photographs until her vision blurred. Vincent whispered in her memory, "Do you really believe he's innocent?" And for the first time, Evelyn realized she wasn't sure. The storm Evelyn had feared finally arrived, not through whispers in tabloids or venomous rumors from rivals, but in the form of a crisp white envelope marked with 3 black letters, FBI. It was waiting for Anthony on his desk when he returned late one night. His assistant had already broken the seal, her hands trembling as she handed it to him. Inside was a summons he was to appear for questioning regarding the death of Marissa King. The past had come back not as a rumor, but as law. When Anthony told Evelyn, his voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the storm beneath. "They're reopening the case," he said quietly, pouring himself a glass of whiskey he didn't touch. "Vincent's influence runs deeper than I thought. He's using the Bureau now, or at least feeding them enough poison to make them look again." Evelyn's heart dropped. "But I thought they cleared you." "They did," Anthony replied sharply, then softened, running a hand through his hair. "But in this country, innocence can be temporary if someone powerful enough wants you guilty." The silence between them was heavy. Evelyn wanted to comfort him, to reach across the table and hold his hand. Yet Vincent's photographs, his poisonous whispers, still lingered in her memory. She swallowed the doubt, burying it deep where Anthony couldn't see. "What does this mean for us?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. Anthony met her gaze, his own eyes burning with a mix of fear and determination. "It means you're in danger too." Within days, Evelyn's life became unrecognizable. Reporters crowded outside her building, shouting her name, demanding answers. Strangers photographed her on the subway, their eyes filled with curiosity or disdain. But worse were the invitations calls from political operatives, messages from journalists offering money for her truth, and veiled threats from anonymous numbers warning her to leave the murderer before it's too late. She was no longer just Evelyn Ramirez, the barista and aspiring artist. She had become Anthony King's lover, a symbol in a war much larger than herself. At first, she tried to stay strong. She told herself she wouldn't break, that her heart still knew who Anthony truly was. But at night, when the city outside grew quiet, she lay awake, replaying every headline, every photograph, every whispered accusation. And always, Vincent's words echoed, "Do you believe he's innocent?" Evelyn insisted on accompanying him when Anthony appeared at the FBI's Chicago field office. He refused at first, but her resolve was unshakable. "I won't let you face them alone," she told him, her voice firm. The office was stark and cold, its fluorescent lights unforgiving. Agents in dark suits escorted Anthony into a small room while Evelyn waited outside, her heart pounding. Through the glass, she caught glimpses. Anthony's face set in grim determination, agents firing questions one after another. Hours passed. When he finally emerged, Anthony's expression was unreadable. Evelyn rushed to him, but he only shook his head. "They don't want the truth," he muttered. "They want a story." That night, Anthony gathered Evelyn in his penthouse. his eyes restless as he paced the room. "This isn't safe anymore," he said, more to himself than to her. "Not for me. Not for you." Evelyn frowned. "What are you talking about?" He stopped, his gaze locking onto hers with sudden intensity. "We're leaving." "Leaving?" "Yes," Anthony said, his voice low, decisive. "Chicago isn't safe. The city, the press, the bureau, they're circling like wolves. Vincent won't stop until he breaks me. And he'll use you to do it. I won't let that happen." Evelyn's breath caught. The thought of running terrified her, but losing him to forces beyond her control was more terrifying. "Where would we go?" she whispered. Anthony's eyes softened just slightly. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one can touch us. I have a house far outside the city, a place my father had built long before the empire. It's small but safe." They left at midnight. Anthony insisted on no security detail, no convoy, just his sleek black car, the city lights fading behind them as they sped into the dark. Evelyn sat beside him, her bag clutched to her chest. The highway stretched endlessly before them, the night pressing close. The world's noise fell away for the first time in weeks, leaving only the engine's hum and the sound of her heartbeat. "Are we fugitives?" she asked softly, half trying to joke. Anthony's lips curved faintly, though his eyes fixed on the road. "Not yet. But if that's what it takes to protect you, I wouldn't hesitate." His words sent both warmth and fear flooding through her. He was a man who would burn the world to shield her. But what if the world was right about him? She pushed the thought aside, leaning against the window, watching the city disappear. The house was nothing like his penthouse in Chicago, or the glass towers that bore his name. It stood in the quiet countryside, surrounded by tall pines and the soft hum of crickets. Wooden beams framed the porch, and the faint scent of cedar clung to the air. Anthony explained, "This was my father's retreat," as he unlocked the door. "Before everything. Before King Industries consumed his life and mine." Inside, the space was warm, almost humble. A stone fireplace dominated the living room, and shelves lined with old books spoke of a quieter time. Evelyn felt out of place, yet strangely comforted. She breathed without fear of cameras or whispers for the first time in weeks. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked softly, watching Anthony as he set down their bags. His gaze met hers, steady and raw. "Because you're the only thing that matters, and I can't lose you, not to Vincent the Bureau, or the ghosts of my past." By the firelight, Anthony finally let the cracks show. He told her of his father's relentless ambition, of the weight of inheriting an empire built on sacrifice. He spoke of Marissa, the love that had soured into resentment, and the fights that had scarred them both. "I wasn't perfect," he admitted, his voice low. "I failed her in ways I can never take back. But Evelyn, I didn't kill her. You have to believe me." Evelyn's chest ached. She wanted to reach for him to silence the ghosts that haunted his every word. But the photograph's video and Vincent's whispers clawed at her heart. Still, as she looked into his eyes, she saw a man stripped of power and armor, just a man begging to be believed. At that moment, she chose silence because silence was easier than lies. As dawn broke over the pines, Evelyn stood on the porch, the cool morning air brushing against her skin. Behind her, Anthony slept for the first time in days, his features softened in rest. The safe house was quiet, but inside her a war raged. She wanted to believe in him, to trust the man who had saved her, held her whispered promises in the dark. But doubt was a shadow that clung too tightly, fed by Vincent's evidence and the world's relentless accusations. Staring into the sunrise, Evelyn whispered to herself a fragile vow. "I'll find the truth. no matter what it costs. Because love was no longer enough, not when the past was determined to follow them into the future. The safe house was meant to be a sanctuary, a quiet refuge away from the relentless eyes of the world. But for Evelyn, its silence had become deafening. She wandered its wooden halls, her thoughts an endless storm of love and doubt, truth and lies. Anthony slept often now, worn down by the weight of battles no man should fight alone, battles in boardrooms, courts, and his heart. When he rested, she explored her footsteps, soft against the creaking floorboards. She told herself she was only curious, but beneath the surface, her soul searched for answers, proof something that could end the war inside her. It was in the study, a room with dusty books and photographs yellowed by time. She ran her fingers along the spines of titles untouched for decades until her hand brushed against the edge of the old oak desk. Something felt wrong, too smooth, too deliberate. She tugged gently, and a hidden drawer slid open with a soft click. Inside lay a stack of papers tied with a silk ribbon worn with age. On top was a leather-bound notebook, its cover cracked and faded. The initials M.K. were etched faintly into the corner. Evelyn's breath caught. Marissa King. Her heart pounded as she opened the journal, the inked words spilling secrets from a voice long silenced. The handwriting was elegant, but urgent, as if Marissa had written in haste, afraid of the shadows around her. Vincent has been calling again. He says Anthony is blinded by ambition and doesn't see what's happening behind the curtain. He thinks he can protect me. But his eyes, there's something in them that chills me. Evelyn's fingers trembled. She turned the page. I told Anthony about Vincent once, but he dismissed it. Said Carter was just another rival. But Vincent isn't after the company alone. He wants more. He wants control over me, over my life. He says Anthony doesn't deserve me. Sometimes I think he believes I belong to him. The words blurred as tears filled Evelyn's eyes. She kept reading, her pulse quickening with every line. Vincent offered me a deal, convince Anthony to sign away his majority shares, and he would make sure I lived free of scandal, free of him. I refused. He didn't take it well. He said accidents happen. And then he smiled. Evelyn dropped the book, her chest heaving. Her mind raced back to the photographs Vincent had shown her, the venomous whispers, the way he had planted doubt in her heart. It hadn't been Anthony who was the monster, it was Vincent all along. He had twisted the narrative, poisoned the evidence, and used Marissa as a pawn in his insatiable hunger for power. Anthony hadn't killed his wife. Vincent had orchestrated her death. The room seemed to spin around Evelyn. Every accusation, every headline, every seed of doubt she had let bloom, Vincent had planted them. And she had believed him. A sob escaped her lips. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What have I done?" The sound of her cry stirred Anthony awake. He appeared at the doorway, his shirt loose, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Evelyn." His voice was raw, concerned. She turned, clutching the journal to her chest. "Anthony, I found this." He stepped forward, frowning as he recognized the notebook. For a moment, grief flickered across his face. The memory of Marissa, the wife he had loved and lost. Then slowly he reached for it. She handed it to him, her hands shaking. As his eyes scanned the words, his expression hardened. His jaw tightened, his shoulders stiffened. When he finally closed the book, his gaze was no longer weary, it burned with fire. "I knew he wanted the company," Anthony said quietly. "But I didn't know. I didn't realize he used her too, that bastard." Evelyn reached for him, tears streaming. "I doubted you. I let him convince me. I'm so sorry, Anthony." Anthony cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "You had reason to doubt. Vincent is skilled at twisting the truth. But now we know. And now, we fight. That night, they sat together by the fire, the journal between them, like a fragile bridge to the truth. Evelyn leaned against Anthony's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, the anchor she had needed all along. Vincent has been building this from the start, Anthony murmured. The leaks, the press, the takeover attempt, every move was calculated. He wanted me destroyed, and he wanted you to doubt me, to stand alone. He thought if he isolated me, I'd crumble. Evelyn shivered. And he almost succeeded. But he underestimated you, Anthony said firmly, tilting her chin so their eyes met. You found the truth. You saved me. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she pressed her forehead to his, a silent vow passing between them. The hours that followed were quiet but intense. Anthony held her as if afraid she would slip away, and Evelyn clung to him as if letting go would mean surrendering to the darkness Vincent had cast over them. They allowed themselves to breathe for the first time in weeks, not as fugitives or prey, but as two souls bound by love and truth. I believe you, Evelyn whispered in the dark, her voice trembling with regret and devotion. I should have always thought of you. Anthony kissed her gently, his lips lingering as if sealing the promise. Then believe in us, because Vincent won't stop. But neither will I. At dawn, Evelyn returned to the study. She placed Marissa's journal back into the drawer, her fingers lingering on the worn leather cover. It wasn't just a relic of the past. It was the key to the future, the weapon they needed to bring Vincent down. As the first light of morning spilled across the quiet countryside, she whispered to herself, no more shadows, no more lies. The truth will set us free. Behind her, Anthony stood silently in the doorway, watching her with a mixture of pride and resolve. The weight of guilt lifted from his shoulders for the first time in years. But in its place rose a new fire: vengeance, justice, and the promise of a battle that would shake everything they knew. Together they stepped into the dawn, no longer fugitives, but warriors. The storm was far from over, but now they had the truth. The night began like any other in the quiet refuge outside Chicago. Evelyn had stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the incredible scent of pine, letting the silence soothe her restless mind. Anthony had promised her safety here, and she had believed him for a time. But safety was an illusion. When the headlights cut across the gravel driveway, she initially thought it was Anthony returning from a call in the city. But the car was unfamiliar, sleek black, its windows tinted too dark. Before she could move, the doors opened. Men in masks stepped out, swift and silent. Her scream never reached the night. A hand clamped over her mouth, arms pinning hers as they dragged her into the car. The last thing she saw before the door slammed shut was the forest, indifferent and endless. When Evelyn awoke, her head throbbed. The air smelled of rust and damp wood. She was tied to a chair in a cavernous warehouse, the kind of place where secrets festered and lives ended. The shadows shifted, and then he appeared. Vincent Carter. No longer the polished CEO with his tailored suits and charming smile. Now he was raw, feverish, his eyes gleaming with something unhinged. He crouched before her, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. He whispered, "You don't know how long I've waited for this. All those years watching you from afar, knowing you belonged to someone who didn't deserve you." Evelyn recoiled, her voice trembling. "Vincent, let me go." His smile widened. "I can't. Not when you're finally where you should be, here with me. Anthony King doesn't see you not the way I do. He clings to you because you're the only light in his darkness. But me, I'd worship you. I'd give you everything." Her heart pounded, terror clawing at her chest. "You killed Marissa," she whispered. "You destroyed Anthony's life and now mine. How can you call that love?" Vincent's eyes flickered momentarily. pain, anger, obsession colliding in a storm. Then he laughed softly, shaking his head. Marissa was an obstacle. You are a destiny. Hours later, Anthony received the call. The voice was Vincent's, smooth and venomous. If you ever want to see Evelyn alive again, you'll do exactly as I say. Transfer every share and every asset of King Industries to me. Walk away with nothing, and perhaps I'll let her go. Anthony's blood turned to ice. If you touch her... Vincent interrupted, mockery lacing his tone. Save the threats. This isn't about business anymore. It's about love, and you've already lost. The line went dead, leaving Anthony's office in a silence that roared louder than thunder. Anthony drove through the night, the city fading into highways, and then into the desolate stretches of New Jersey's industrial outskirts. He carried nothing but determination, and the journal Evelyn had found the proof that could destroy Vincent. But none of it mattered if he couldn't save her. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark, its doors rusted. Anthony's grip tightened on the steering wheel. His empire, his life, his very soul, they meant nothing compared to the woman inside. The door creaked as Anthony stepped into the dimly lit space. The smell of oil and dust hung heavy, mingling with the faint hum of distant machinery. Anthony Vincent's voice echoed smooth as silk cutting through the shadows. Evelyn was tied to a chair in the center, her eyes wide with fear, but unbroken. When she saw Anthony, tears welled in her eyes. Let her go, Vincent. Anthony's voice was low and steady, but beneath it burned fury. Vincent emerged from the darkness, elegant even here, his suit immaculate, his smile unhinged. Always so commanding, always so sure the world belongs to you. But not this time. Tonight you lose everything. Anthony took a step forward. You want the company? Please take it. You want my name, my empire? Take that too. But Evelyn, she's not yours to claim. Vincent's eyes blazed, his mask of composure cracking. She's been mine from the moment I saw her. You think she chose you, but she was always meant for me. Do you know what it's like to love someone so completely it consumes you? To watch her waste herself on a man drowning in his ghosts. Evelyn flinched as Vincent's hand brushed her cheek. Anthony surged forward, but Vincent pulled a gun from his jacket, aiming it squarely at Evelyn's temple. Another step, Vincent hissed, and she dies. The world narrowed to a breathless silence. Anthony's heart pounded, but his eyes never left Evelyn's. He spoke not to Vincent, but to her. I'm here, he whispered, steady as stone, and I'll get you out of this. Tears slid down Evelyn's cheeks, but she lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with unyielding trust. Vincent snarled, pathetic. Even now she clings to you. He pressed the gun harder against her skin. But I can make her forget you. I can make her mine. Anthony's jaw tightened. You'll never have her because love isn't chains, Vincent. It's freedom, and she'll never choose a cage. Vincent's finger twitched on the trigger. The moment stretched into eternity. Then Anthony raised his hand slowly, his voice calm, deliberate. Take me instead. You want revenge? Please take it. You want power? Please take it. But let her walk away. Vincent's laughter was low, hollow. The great Anthony King kneeling for love. How poetic. But Evelyn cried out, her voice breaking. No, Anthony, don't. Her words cracked the tension, shattering Vincent's control. In that instant, Evelyn twisted, slamming her chair against the concrete floor. The impact jolted the gun, and Anthony lunged. The struggle was brutal. Two men fueled by fury and desperation. The gun clattered across the floor, sliding into the shadows. Vincent's fists were sharp, but Anthony's rage was sharper. Years of restraint, grief, and loss exploded in every strike. Evelyn screamed as they crashed against the walls, metal groaning dust falling from the rafters. At last, Anthony pinned Vincent to the ground, his arm pressed against his throat. His eyes burned with fire, his voice a growl. "This ends now." Vincent gasped, a twisted smile curling even as his strength waned. "You'll never erase me. I live in your shadows, in hers. She'll never be free." Anthony's fist slammed once more, and Vincent fell still. Breathing hard, Anthony stumbled to Evelyn, tearing the ropes from her wrists. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing against his chest. "I thought I'd lose you," she whispered, her voice shaking. He held her tighter than ever, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. "Never. I would burn the world before I let that happen." Their embrace was fierce and desperate, and they spoke not of passion alone, but of survival, of choosing each other in the face of darkness. Outside, the first light of dawn seeped across the horizon, painting the warehouse in pale gold. Anthony led Evelyn into the morning, her hand clasped tightly in his. Behind them, Vincent's empire of lies lay broken, his obsession defeated. But the war was not yet over. The terror of captivity lingered for Evelyn, but so did the unshakable truth. She and Anthony were bound together not by circumstance, but by love forged in fire. And for Anthony, holding her close, one vow remained unspoken, but certain. He would never again let shadows steal the woman who had become his reason to fight. The battle was won, but the war for their future had only just begun. The air inside the warehouse was still thick with dust from the brutal fight. Evelyn's wrists burned from the ropes that had bound her, and her legs trembled as Anthony half-carried her toward the broken doorway. Dawn was creeping in, pale and merciless. But there was no relief yet, not while Vincent still breathed somewhere in the shadows. Anthony's grip on her hand was iron strong, his chest rising and falling in harsh bursts. His body bore the marks of battle blood on his knuckles, a bruise forming along his jaw, but his eyes never left her. They blazed with the kind of determination only a man who had already lost once could carry. "We have to move," he whispered urgently. "He's not finished." And indeed, Vincent Carter was not. The metallic clang of footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. Vincent emerged from the far side of the warehouse, staggering, blood streaking his temple, but his smile unbroken, unhinged. In his hand gleamed a knife, small but lethal, its blade catching the first rays of morning. "You think you've won?" he snarled, his voice sharp with madness. "This isn't over. She was mine before she was ever yours. And if I can't have her," his eyes locked on Evelyn, feverish and wild, "then no one will." Anthony shoved Evelyn behind him, his stance coiled and ready. "You're finished, Vincent. It's over." Vincent laughed low and chilling. "Not until she's in my arms or in the grave." With a roar, he lunged. The clash was brutal, primal. Anthony intercepted Vincent's strike, the knife slicing dangerously close to his side as they grappled. Evelyn screamed, her voice piercing the chaos, but neither man faltered. Blow after blow, the two titans collided, one driven by obsession, the other by love. Metal groaned as they crashed against crates, dust and debris raining down. The knife glinted between them, changing hands in the struggle, a promise of death hovering inches away. Evelyn, though weak, refused to be helpless. Spotting a rusted metal pipe nearby, she scrambled forward, ignoring the pain in her wrists, and swung with all her strength. The pipe struck Vincent's shoulder, sending him stumbling. Anthony seized the opening. He wrenched the knife free and hurled it across the floor, the clatter echoing like thunder. Then, with one final surge, he slammed Vincent against the concrete, pinning him. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the ragged breaths of victor and vanquished. And then came the sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the warehouse windows, followed by the thunder of boots. FBI agents and police officers swarmed the building, weapons raised. Their voices cut through the chaos. "Freeze hands, where we can see them." Anthony slowly raised his arms, his eyes never leaving Vincent. But the agent's attention quickly shifted. Evidence spilled across the warehouse floor, boxes of files. Vincent had kept flash drives, documents connecting him to corporate espionage, to Marissa's death, to the planned takeover. His empire of lies lay scattered in plain sight. One agent cuffed Vincent, dragging him to his feet. The madman's laughter echoed as he was pulled away, his eyes locked on Evelyn. "She'll never be free of me," he hissed. "I live in her mind now." Anthony lunged forward, fury burning in his veins, but Evelyn's weak grip on his arm stopped him. "No, Anthony," she whispered. "It's over. He's done." But the battle had left scars more immediate than Vincent's words. As the agents swept the warehouse, Evelyn staggered. Her knees buckled, and before Anthony could catch her, she collapsed to the ground. "Evelyn!" His voice cracked raw with terror. He knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. Blood seeped through the fabric of her blouse near her side. When had she been struck? The knife. A stray shard of glass. Panic roared in his chest as her breath came shallow, uneven. "No, no, no, no. Stay with me," Anthony pleaded, his hands pressing against the wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. "You're not leaving me. Not like this." Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain, but she tried to smile. "Anthony, I'm okay." "Don't you dare say that," he choked, tears streaking his face. "I can't lose you. Not again. Not like Marissa." The memory of his wife's death, the helplessness, the guilt, it surged back in waves. But this time he refused to be powerless. "Medic," he roared at the agents. "Get a medic in here now." The minutes stretched into eternities. Agents swarmed radios, crackling, medics rushing forward. But all Anthony could see was Evelyn in his arms, her blood on his hands. "I should have protected you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "This is my fault. I promised I'd keep you safe. And now—" Her hand rose weakly, brushing his cheek. "You saved me," she whispered. "You always save me." Her touch undid him. He pressed his forehead to hers, his tears mingling with her sweat. "I can't live without you, Evelyn. You're my reason. You're the only thing that matters." Her lips moved faintly. "Then, don't let me go." "I won't," he vowed. "Not now. Not ever." The medics arrived, pulling her gently from his arms. Anthony resisted at first, but Evelyn's faint nod convinced him. He stood back, his fists clenched, watching as they worked to stabilize her oxygen mask. Pressure bandages, urgent voices. Every second was agony. When they lifted her onto the stretcher, Anthony followed, refusing to let her out of his sight. The agents tried to stop him, but one glance at his face, the fury, the desperation made them step aside. "She's my fiancée," he lied without hesitation, though the word was half a promise, half a plea. "I'm not leaving her." And so he rode with her, his hand clasped tightly around hers, as the ambulance tore through New Jersey's empty roads toward the hospital. As dawn broke, the ambulance lights bathed Anthony's face in red and blue. Evelyn lay unconscious beside him, machines beeping, medics murmuring. Anthony bowed his head, pressing his lips to her hand. "Don't leave me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'll give up everything. My company name, fortune, don't leave me." Outside, the city stirred awake, unaware that in the back of that ambulance rode a man who had fought the world, defeated his greatest enemy, and now faced the only battle that truly mattered, the battle for the woman he loved. And in his heart, one truth rang louder than any siren, any prayer, any vow. He would not survive losing her. Autumn painted New York City in golden hues when the name Vincent Carter, once again dominated the front pages of every newspaper. But this time, not with flashy praise, not with the glamorous image in an elegant suit. This time, it was the dazed face of a defeated man, hands cuffed, eyes fixed on the worn wooden floor of the federal courtroom. Throughout the trial, evidence from Marissa's diary and secret documents in the warehouse exposed the entire truth. Vincent was the manipulator behind the accident of Anthony's late wife and a series of schemes to seize King Industries. When the sentence was pronounced, the judge's voice resounded, life imprisonment, no parole. The entire courtroom fell silent. Evelyn held Anthony's hand tightly, his eyes closing for a long time. When they opened again for the first time in years, that gaze no longer carried the darkness of haunting shadows. Anthony had been vindicated. In the days that followed, the press was flooded with images of Anthony King, but no longer as the billionaire under suspicion, rather as the man who had fought to reclaim justice. Anthony King, the survivor after darkness, the man who lost everything and found himself again. The board of King Industries convened urgently, officially restoring all his positions and power. Investors returned, stock prices soared, and Anthony walked into the company headquarters for the first time in many months without seeing doubtful eyes. Evelyn watched him in that moment, her heart full of pride. But more than honor, what mattered most to her was that Anthony had escaped the ghosts of his past. One winter night, New York was drenched in festive lights. Times Square glowed like a sky full of artificial stars. The sea of people crowded together, awaiting the New Year's countdown. Anthony held Evelyn's hand as they wove through the crowd. She looked at him in surprise, but his eyes sparkled with a secret. When the giant electronic clock on the high-rise began to count down 10, 9, 8, Anthony suddenly knelt amidst the noisy crowd, beneath the dazzling neon lights. The red velvet box opened, and inside was a glittering ring reflecting the lights into 1,000 shimmering rays. Even amid the cheers, Evelyn Ramirez's voice rang out steady and sure. After all the storms, you are the only dawn in my life. Will you marry me forever? Evelyn was stunned, tears streaming uncontrollably. Thousands of eyes turned toward them, cheers erupting like crashing waves. Yes, I do, she sobbed. Fireworks exploded at the exact moment the clock struck 0. Brilliant light burst across the New York sky, and in his arms their kiss sealed that moment, eternal. The following spring, the ancient church in Manhattan was radiant with white flowers and shimmering candles. Evelyn wore a pure white gown, her eyes sparkling like an angel stepped out of a painting. Anthony, in an elegant black suit, stood waiting for her at the end of the aisle, his gaze gentler than ever. When the church doors opened, the orchestra began, Canon in D. Evelyn strolled step by step between rows, packed with loved ones, friends, and colleagues. Light filtered through the stained glass windows, bathing her hair in a sacred golden glow. Anthony looked at her unblinking, as though if he let go, she would vanish. When their hands joined, their vows echoed through the sacred space. For richer or poorer, in sickness and health, joy and sorrow, I choose you, Evelyn, today and forever. She smiled through tears. I choose you, Anthony King, today and forever. The bells tolled and confetti burst. All the shadows that once weighed them down were now only the past. The small villa in the suburbs was now filled with laughter. Evelyn sat in an armchair holding a little girl with soft curly hair and innocent brown eyes. With a rare radiant smile, Anthony carried a baby boy tugging playfully at his father's tie. The twins, the gift of love after so much pain. Anthony sat down beside Evelyn, kissing her forehead gently. I once thought I would live forever in the past. But you and our children have given me a present and a future." Evelyn looked up at him, smiling tenderly. "And I once thought I was just an ordinary girl. But you showed me that love can change everything." They held each other close in a sunlit home where children's laughter blended with the soft music of peace. Anthony King, once a man branded a murderer, now a symbol of resilience and justice. Evelyn Ramirez, once an ordinary girl, now the heart of an empire, and the mother of two little angels. Their lives prove that love does not erase the past, but can heal it. Love does not promise a smooth road, but gives us the strength to walk through every storm. If you have walked with Anthony and Evelyn throughout this journey, from that fateful day in Brooklyn, through suspicion, betrayal, sorrow, to the moment of rebirth, let this story remind us all: true love never surrenders to darkness. It fights it, sacrifices, and in the end, it triumphs. Believe in love. Be brave enough to hold the hand of the one you cherish, no matter the storms around you. In the end, the light always waits at the end of the road.